Hey, you lucky libertarians, it's another exciting episode of the Scottish Liberty Podcast with me, Tom Laird, and my co-host, the Madcap Ancap.
Antony Sammeroff.
And today on the show we have a special guest. As usual, we always like to spoil with special guests. And we have two for the price of one. We have two Sammeroffs there, plural. And if you'd like to introduce our guest, Antony.
This is my dad, Lawrence Sammeroff, esteemed master of the plaster first aid kit world. How surgical dressings? How would you describe your business today?
Well, as far as I remember, I was always plastered.
Okay.
But seriously, my dad started a business in 1939, engaged in the manufacture of first aid dressings and first aid kits.
The plaster master.
Plaster master, okay. And there was some trepidation here. There's an old saying that wherever you get two Jews, you get three opinions. So it could be a really interesting one today. But the theme of our show today is, what's it like doing business in a communist country? What's it like for a Western businessman to conduct business in a country that's completely closed off and suspicious of Westerners? And Antony's dad is going to school us on that today, because he done that very thing back in the days just after the death of Mao Zedong.
Yes, my dad is particularly unique in this respect because his business was one of the first to, is that not right? One of the first to start going into China when it opened its borders to foreign capital. And so you got a unique insight into what that was like, but also you managed to see a whole bunch of changes happen over the course of 3 decades or more. Is that right?
Well, it's almost all correctly, but really this was prior. I was out there prior to them introducing any foreign capital. When I first went there, there was no way you could introduce foreign capital.
Right.
I can expand on that if you like.
Yes, please
Okay, please do.
Well, long before the times of computer, when you could now go online with Alibaba or Made in China or other similar sites and find manufacturing sources, I used to go into the library and pore over various books and compendiums of manufacturers. I've been doing business in India in that particular way for a number of years, and we finally found a source in China that could produce adhesive tapes for hospitals.
Wow.
And we started importing these things. They came in from China, and at that time there was no private industry. The entire China was run by so-called SOPs, state-owned enterprises, and they all ran to strict government regulations regarding pricing, etc. So you couldn't negotiate a price. But having said that, we won a contract with the UK hospitals for adhesive tapes, and we started importing these, but they came in very ornate tubular containers.
Okay.
Very, very decorative, full of Chinese characters and what have you. And we were selling into the UK hospitals, who at that time I think would have been skeptical about the quality.
Yeah.
But the quality was absolutely excellent.
Okay.
So we used to take them out, these ornate containers, put them in white cardboard boxes, put a descriptive label on them, and ship them out to the hospitals all over the country, and they went down extremely well.
Okay. And were these adhesive tapes, were they something that the Chinese had developed, or was that a vestige of the colonial?
I think you're absolutely right. I think this particular factory, which I'll go on and tell you about, was probably started with Western technology.
Okay.
But there was, during the years of the Cultural Revolution, virtually no outsiders were allowed in the country. But somehow or other they probably carried on that factory to supply the needs of China. And then, of course, when they wanted to bring in foreign currency, they wanted to export these to various countries.
Right. Okay. Do you have? Sorry, just quickly. Do you have? You don't happen to have somewhere any of these ornate containers that they arrived in?
Well, this is going back to around about 1979.
Right.
So unfortunately not.
I'm sure they'd be an antique now.
So 79. That's about the time. That's the time of the Falklands. Then, roughly about the same time as the Falklands.
Was it not prior? Was it not prior? I'm
yeah,
not sure.
79, 80, probably. Yeah.
So at that time, as I said, when we started importing from them, we weren't allowed to go and visit the factory or visit anywhere in China. But when I heard somewhere on the news that under certain circumstances they would allow foreigners grant them a visa for business purposes to come into the country, and when we put it up to the Chinese embassy that we were doing business in China, they granted my late father and I visas to enter the country, which we did so in about 1981. So yeah.
Tell us what that was like.
Strange. Well, we were picked up by our hosts who spoke English, and we were told we could only stay in. This was in Shanghai, by the way.
Okay.
We were stayed with only 2 hotels you were allowed to stay in. One was the Peace Hotel and the Shanghai Mansions, and we said, which one do you recommend? They said the Peace Hotel, which is right on the Bund. It still actually exists today, this particular hotel. And when we were taken there, the building looked wonderful, but it was the rooms and everything were in a terrible state of disrepair. Our bedroom was the size of 3 or 4 normal bedrooms. Even the bathroom was as big as you expect a hotel room. But when we tried to turn on the hot water tap or any tap, they just fall off in your hands.
Right.
They were originally made in beautiful gilt fittings, but they're all tarnished.
Okay.
And the carpets were threadbare. We were handed monopoly money. I say monopoly money because this was not money that the Chinese used. This was money for foreigners to use.
Right.
And this, you might have thought this would open up the whole world. You're only allowed to use that currency in 2 places.
Right.
Either your hotel or in what is called the friendship store, run by the government to get souvenirs and to bring
Sure.
dollars.
So kind of like tokens, really, more than actual currency.
This system still exists today in Cuba, strangely enough.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
You're given different currency that's to hide from the people the true value of money, I think.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah. And what was the cuisine like?
Well, at that time, I didn't really know much about Chinese food, and we were taken up for breakfast in the morning, and they didn't even know how to set the table. He just planked down knives and forks. He threw the irons on the table. Didn't expect you, of course, to know chopsticks, and you were expected to make your table placing, and the food was very strange.
Okay.
I grew accustomed to it.
Right. So did you know half the time what you were actually eating?
Sometimes it's better not to ask, but
right.
I will tell you an anecdote about that shortly.
Okay.
Why make us wait? Let's hear the anecdote.
No, it comes as part of the progression.
Okay.
So anyhow, we were taken the next morning. First of all, the roads, you could hardly, when we walked along the famous Bund, the waterline of Shanghai, you could hardly tell the difference between a man and a woman. Everybody was dressed in, men and women in the China Mao tunic costumes.
Okay.
The women had their hair cropped short, no jewelry, no makeup.
Right.
And the people stared at us as if we'd arrived from outer space with gaping mouths because the country had been closed for over 20 years.
Right.
Just closed for any.
So
maybe
some
never
of
seen a white person.
Yeah, but
Correct.
some of the younger ones,
Especially.
Yeah.
Especially. So the next morning we were duly collected by our hosts and driven. Well, first of all, we had to wait to get accompanied. We had one car between so many different departments. We had to wait our turn to get this car for a couple of hours, and we were taken. Hardly any cars on the road. Millions of bicycles. You've heard the song. There are 2 million bicycles in Beijing.
Yeah.
It was like that. Anyway, we were taken to this factory, and I have to say, going back to what you were saying, there must have been Western investment.
Okay.
The machinery and plant was pretty good, especially compared to what we've been buying from India, I have to say. And you could eaten off the floor. It was perfectly clean, the factory. But it was so cold you cannot imagine. It was well under freezing.
Really?
The women were trying to work with mittens with their fingers, all with chilblains, trying to operate. They obviously couldn't afford to run
Yeah.
heating. So when we viewed the factory and were taken into the meeting room, and in China, when you go into a meeting room, everybody comes in like flies to get on the scene.
Right.
Every Tom, Dick, and Harry around the table,
Yeah.
including the factory manager.
Okay.
None of them spoke English,
Okay.
so our hosts had to act as interpreters.
Okay.
So they asked us how we liked the factory and what have you, and they were actually holding the Chinese tea from blowing away the tea leaves from the top, but mainly to keep their hands warm.
Right.
I mean, that was wonderful for them to get their hands on a hot cup of tea. We gave them very nice compliments about the factory. Anything else to say? Yes. Now, coming on to your point, I said to them, we get these things in lovely ornate boxes. It's very, very nice. But we explained to them what we used to do with them. Could you not possibly get plain white boxes, not expensive? You don't want any reduction in price. Put them in with a little label in English. Ship them to us that way.
Okay.
And they looked at us as if we were absolutely nuts.
Right.
And they said, "No, this is the way it is. In terms,
Right.
that's the way it is. That's the way it's got to be." And I subsequently found out that was to do with every commodity in China.
Okay.
There was no private label, no making up for Sainsbury's or Asda or any other company.
Right.
You had to take it
One size fits all.
as it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the contradiction between these being sent to you in these ornate, traditionally Chinese boxes and the homogenization of individuals as all having the same haircut. I mean, was one to try and strip away people's identity, but then on the other hand, there's this impulse to show China's mark on the world or their unique culture.
I think the latter part, again, I'll come on to, I think it's a very salient point. But I think it was largely because he didn't know any different. I mean, it's been closed for such a long time. He didn't know about outside markets, about
Right.
the advantages of doing this or that. And anyway, it was all controlled by the government. The government says, do this, you have to do this. If we went from a similar factory in Shanghai to Hubei, different provinces, and they had their own factories, similar factories, the products would be maybe variation between the products, but the prices were all the same. So they're not centrally set.
So this is the thing, and so when you were doing business, say here, if you might manufacture the same product, but you would customize it, say for Boots or for Asda, you might be sending the same thing, but you would put a different label on it depending who.
Yeah, so we subsequently got into that sort of business. At that time, we're supplying mainly into hospitals, but subsequently, if we had been doing business with retailers that wanted their own branding, it would have been impossible.
Right.
We'd had to get the things in bulk and package them here.
Okay. What sort of inspired you to look at that market? I mean, you would think for a lot of people they would say, well, that's a dead market. There's nothing happening there. Let's not even bother. What was it in you that made you go, well, there's just because of that? One way somebody will look at something and say, well, look, all these people don't wear shoes. Therefore, let's not bother trying to sell them shoes. Whereas somebody else would look at it and go, that's a perfect market and opportunity. They don't wear shoes. They need them. Let's sell them. So, what was it that made you see the opportunity there?
And only one word.
Okay.
Well, quality, of course, but price.
Okay.
I mean, we were able to buy a price, even allowing for our packaging, which gave us a very, very healthy margin.
Right.
Because we were not physically manufacturing ourselves.
Yeah.
We had to deal with big, nationally known companies and big buying power. And unless we could buy cleverly, my late father used to say, if you cannot buy right, you cannot sell right.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Wise words. And, with the pricing structure coming from the central planners, it would be really quite impossible for the Chinese to determine whether they were getting a good deal or not. I mean,
Exactly.
selling this in an ornate box would be surely more expensive than doing it in a generic fashion.
Absolutely.
They could spend those resources on something more necessary, like, I don't know, electricity, so that
Yeah,
people would
heating.
They did
heating,
not
for
have.
example. But because the prices were centrally planned, they couldn't tell how to allocate
They
resources
had
efficiently.
no concept of that.
Right.
But anyway, to move, can I fast forward a little bit?
Sure.
I'll miss out little bits in between, but take us to the very last evening we were there, and we were invited. We were told we were extremely privileged to go to a banquet organised by the CEO of that particular organisation.
Okay.
And we were taken to this other hotel, which I was talking about, called the Shanghai Mansions. It was so cold, they had to give us coats. We weren't prepared for the weather. We walked over there in the snow and what have you. We got to this other place. It was heated, I have to say, to somewhat. And
Okay.
taken in the first time I had seen, and I've seen hundreds more, thousands more, of going into a room with a lazy Susan.
Right.
You know, a circular table that spins, and again, everybody comes out, and it's important. Where you sit is really important in China.
Right.
You had to sit the CEO. My father had to be next to him. I had to be sitting next to the factory manager who they brought there, and my interpreter host, and they will seat you in the place.
Okay.
And a series of dishes come. As you say, it's better not to ask. I'll tell you about one of them shortly. I wanted to stay on the subject of plasters.
Okay.
So the factory manager, each person gets up and says a toast in China. They have this Chinese rice wine that they call baijiu. I call it paint stripper. I don't know what the proof is, but you better not ask.
Right. Okay.
So the chairman, first of all, the CEO would get up, spoke in Chinese, something like, welcome our hosts all the way from the UK, and my interpreter, these guys here enjoyed meeting with you, and you went to the factory, and blah, blah, blah. Gambe is the first word I ever learned in Chinese.
Okay.
Gambe is our equivalent of bottoms up.
Okay.
So Gambe, down in a runner, and you burns a hole in your stomach.
Right.
And then they're more or less pointing at you, and I had to get up and compliment them in a similar fashion.
Okay.
Gambe. I was looking for the plant pot, by the way, to shut them out by that time. But anyway, so various courses come up, and talking about your food. What one came, and they will pick the chopsticks. They will pick the best part of that particular animal or what have you, the cheek of a fish, I think, put it on the guest's plate, and
Right.
we didn't know what was going on there, what we were eating. So one dish came to the guy puts it on my plate, and it was round and greyish, brownish colour, and I took a bite out of this, and I didn't like it.
Right. Okay.
And Chinese you can lose face very easily.
Okay.
So I didn't.
So suddenly the rice wine was looking like a good option.
Absolutely. So I said to my interpreter, "What is this?" He said, "Oh, this is a very good speciality." He says, "You know the little bird called sparrow?"
Oh.
I said, "Yes, I know about sparrows." He says, "When sparrow hatchy, we go choppy. And you look down there and you see this little thing, and you can just make out the beak.
Right.
They probably just deep fry it or something after that." And
Deep fried
splatted
Anyhow,
fledgling.
the main part of the story is that when we complimented, we exchanged drinks with the factory manager, of course, and suddenly he banged his fist on the table. Everybody turns round and looks at him, and he started spouting out, and the guy was, and my interpreter was dumbfounded, I have to say. He said, "The factory manager enjoyed your visit so much, your first visit by a distinguished guest since the Cultural Revolution, and we enjoyed this evening with you and all the little conversation. He has decided that he's going to pack the goods exactly as you want." It was unheard of in China. They're all looking like he's crazy. He said, "But just one thing. There's one thing. You have to pay a little bit more money." So I said to them, well, tell him that we don't mind this, but I find it rather difficult to understand because these ornate boxes are extremely expensive.
Yeah.
I'm talking about just a plain cardboard box. He said, talking back to you, but they lose the honor of the factory. They
Right.
lose the honor of the factory
Right.
by not presenting them. No mind that we were taking these and throwing them away. They
Right.
wanted compensation for that.
Okay.
It took 2 years, but I believe we were the first ever company importing from China, certainly in our field, to break the mold of you get it exactly as it is.
Okay. And was there any and on the other side, on the British side, was there any problems or restrictions in terms of import?
No, they had an arrangement with long before the European Union.
Right. Yeah.
We had an arrangement with China that certain goods you're allowed to bring in tariff free.
Right, and this was medical stuff, so it would,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Just for our American listeners or watchers, just that a plaster would be a band-aid in your language, just in case you're wondering.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you'll be familiar with medical tapes, which we were
Yeah.
at that time. We were getting from China.
So that the medical tape, so your big customer then would be the NHS for
At
that.
that time was the NHS, the various. We put up a tender that was broken into various regions. You would have Yorkshire purchasing, you would have
Right.
the London hospitals, the Scottish hospitals. We didn't win them all. We submitted when these annual tenders came out, when we used to put in the prices for the tapes,
Right.
and we won several contracts.
And previously to that, then your main supplier was India.
For these, India, and we made some home production in our own little way as well.
Okay. And was the quality of the Chinese tape superior in every way? Or?
I would say it was absolutely excellent in
Okay.
terms of quality.
So,
Where were they getting the raw material for I mean, how?
That's a very interesting. Well, first of all, the fabric on which it's spread is cotton, so China's
Right,
a huge
yeah.
cotton producer. Where they got the adhesives, probably they were sourcing these. They found if it was run by either an American or a European company pre-war, or certainly prior Cultural Revolution, they probably sourced raw materials.
Okay. Antony.
okay, so moving on to you continue to do business in China. In fact, you still do in a consulting capacity to this day. But take us forward a bit. Let's hear about the changes you saw begin to happen in China over the 80s. What did you see as you visited there
But
over time?
first of all, I have to tell you that every time I went back, there was a change. Even if it was 6 months later, I was thinking, am I still in the same
Right.
city? Because the changes were so rapid. I told you about the people staring at me when the first time. A year after that, the struggle, it meant nothing. That's within a year.
Okay.
And then I travelled around various different places in China and primitive airlines and
Yeah.
what have you. But I'm still here to tell the tale.
Okay.
And I saw things. As I told you, all bicycles, hardly any motor cars. And then I saw the progression after a few years. It was a great thing to actually drive a motorized bicycle.
Sure.
Just a simple motorized, then
Yeah.
a motorbike, and now you can't
Okay.
go there for cars.
And was there much in the way of construction going on when you first arrived there?
When I first arrived there, no, but within a year or two, buildings are at one time in China, probably around about the mid 90s, they say that over 60% of these huge cranes that they used to construct high rises were based in Greater Shanghai.
Right. Okay.
When we looked opposite from our hotel on the famous Bund, the skyline of Shanghai, which is built of kind of Victoriana, beautiful buildings.
Yeah.
The opposite side was green fields. Now it's known what is called Pudong, which is like New York.
Right.
It's one of the highest buildings in the world, apart from the one in Dubai, and it's just packed with skyscrapers.
Right.
And this happened over an incredibly short space of time. Before you knew it, they were throwing bridges over over the river in Shanghai to join up Pudong with the other side of Shanghai, which is known as Puxi.
Okay.
And they've even got one bridge that goes, a tunnel that goes underneath
Okay.
with about a sandwich tunnel. They've got about six to eight lanes going in one direction, and underneath 6 to 8 lanes going in the other direction.
Unbelievable.
Okay. And how did your Chinese language progress over this time?
I have to say very little, apart
Okay.
from Gambei and a few other words,
Okay.
because the Chinese got to know very, very quickly if you wanted to do international business, they had to learn English.
Okay.
And eventually, I can tell you about the start, when they eventually allowed some private industry in the beginning to come in, they made sure that these companies employed, for the sales department, if they wanted to export business, they had to employ English-speaking people.
Okay.
And that still happens to this
Yeah.
day.
Right.
And was the thrust of the market at that time, Chinese-wise, was it mainly China exporting out, or were there any Western companies that were actually bringing goods into China?
Well, we were for starters, but
Yeah.
very, very few. Nowadays, everybody brings in from China.
Yeah.
But we were pioneers. There might have been there were people, I think, in the textile industry. When we went to the main office on our first visit, we didn't actually go into an office. It was a building with, I would say, like screens around it. So while we were discussing our business, behind the screens, a terrible noise, and people babbling away, talking about textiles,
Yeah.
talking about clothing and fabrics and what have you. So I think people, as soon as China opened up, our business was a small beer compared to importing clothing and textiles. Of
Sure.
course. So there were other people importing from China, of course.
Yeah. But through time, I mean, imagine when you first arrived in China, the criteria, there'd be a lot of restrictions on you in terms of movement and where you could go on
Yes.
your own and unsupervised. Did that ease off through time, or was it
Oh,
all?
of course. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, when I wanted to go a place, they said me to fly somewhere, I had to go with my host.
Yeah.
And they had to buy the ticket. And even if you had an airline ticket, we bought some tickets from the UK. They said these tickets, we've paid for them. We had to go to an office and get these tickets endorsed.
Right.
And the queues of people, there was no computerized booking, of course.
Okay.
You had to push away the front to stamp our airline ticket.
Okay.
So traveling was really, really difficult.
Yeah. And I take it was almost impossible to get off the beaten track
I would have been a bit wary of doing
Right.
it anyhow.
Okay.
Because my father came once or twice, but I mostly travelled by myself,
Right.
and I would have been wary. But each place I went, a host would meet me at the railway station or at the airport,
Mhm.
and I was normally well looked after. They really wanted to do business with the West.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Or with the West in general, or with Britain in particular, or with
Well, Britain certainly was they wanted to do business, but I think anybody could bring in hard currency
Right.
as music for their ears.
Okay.
So it began with sticky tape. Let's hear about the evolution of your business in China.
Started with assist.
Right.
Well, things were a little difficult. I don't want to be disparaging to the Chinese because I've got a lot of very Chinese friends,
Yep.
and I think by and large, but there's some instances, as could be anywhere in the world, we had difficulties. China opened up across from Hong Kong. They opened up the first town they allowed to open up to Western business and free of the various restrictions was called Shenzhen.
Okay.
It's just a train ride over from Hong Kong. It was a fishing village of 8,500 people, maybe in the late 70s, early 80s. It's now a city of about, I think, 15 million people, but within a short space of time from when I first went there, only maybe 7 or 8 years after that, I'm sure there was 2 or 3 million people from 8,500.
Okay.
So it just grew up fantastically. And at that time, and then they were allowed, the agencies, most of the agencies there, they would find Chinese manufacturers for you, and they would negotiate on your behalf. And we used to we had a contract for the hospitals to bring in disposable arm slings, like a triangular bandage.
Sure.
You put it on, instead of washing it afterwards, you chuck it away. Made from non-woven paper. And that company in Shenzhen managed to find a supplier in China, and we told at that time they allowed us to do private. They came in with our label. They supplied us with a sample, and we got a trial shipment of 10,000 pesos. They sold out.
Yeah.
Placed another order for 200,000. Then we started bringing in container full, and the price was good and the quality was good. And about the second container that came in, my quality manager came running down to me and he said, "These arm slings are not up to scratch." I said, "What do you mean? They look fine to me." He said, "Well, instead of 30 grams per square meter, that's the thickness of the fabric,
Yeah.
only about 20, it's taken 1/3 of the weight of that fabric.
Okay.
Might look the same, but it's a lot thinner,
Yeah.
and maybe a plaster cast could probably go through it."
Right, I hear you.
Right.
So we were stuck. We asked them at that time, but because of monetary exchange, we complained there's no way to get that money recompense
Sure.
back for us. So we said, well, how we can't do any more business with you. This was going to go to a fantastic business. They said, well, you take several more shipments, and each shipment will give you maybe 20% extra free of charge until you defray the costs of
Right.
the duff.
Right,
the
right.
bandages.
So they found a alternative arrangement.
And is it?
But we wouldn't accept that though. This is a very interesting story.
Yeah.
We said, well, we're not happy about it. We before we do anything further, we want to visit the factory.
Right.
So come on over. Well, I had to do several businesses there, and I was in Hong Kong. Get the train into Shenzhen, pick you up, take you through various high roads that are fantastic. Then you're going through a little village. They're in the middle of constructing the roads via a snake farm where they got me to eat snake meat, but that's a big digression.
Okay.
And I moved fast forward to arriving at this. No, I've moved too far forward. I'm really sorry. Before that, they met me in Nanjing because the factory is there, and they took me to this factory. History how we got there with a drunken driver, but took me around this beautiful factory, and we sat down. Well, are you prepared now to do business with us? I said, very sorry. I said, what do you mean? I said, this factory produced lovely non-woven items. They've never produced a surgical dressing in their puffs or in their history.
Yeah.
And they look at me and say, you can't trick me. And they told me, by the way, prior to that, not to exchange business cards. They are frightened if you will start dealing directly with the factory.
Okay.
That's quite common.
Right.
Still is to this day. So that's the end of the story. So they were crying to me, and then next time I told you, went to Shenzhen. They took me to this other factory, and I went up there, and I have to tell you, they were packing these triangular bandages. I tell you how clean it was. The same factory were producing wedding gowns for the Chinese, disposable wedding gowns. They were magnificent, with flowers, coloured flowers on it, fantastic.
Disposable wedding gowns?
Yes, made of non-woven paper.
Okay.
Non-woven paper. God forbid anyone would put a match to it. Poor bride would be toast in 3 seconds. But you can imagine a wedding gown has to be really clean.
Yeah.
No, a bride doesn't want that. So that's how. But they said, where do you produce the raw materials? And they took us to another factory in the same town where they had quite a modern extruder. I don't want to go into the technical parts. We're satisfied with that. And that business progressed there.
Okay.
But eventually I got involved in manufacturing in China, and that's moving forward quite a long way.
Okay, but it must have been a bit of a minefield in terms of, not only have you got the sort of political minefield to sort of navigate, but there's a cultural one as well. I mean, it must have been very easy just to commit a faux pas without...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I still say to this day, and I've been to China innumerable times, I don't know the Chinese culture 100%. And anybody that's not Chinese and says he knows 100% this.
Is there a lot of protocol?
There is a lesson now with the young
Yeah.
people coming up and being more mobile and going over to various countries
In all the
to
American movies
and
and
getting
Yeah.
educated and what
Okay.
have you. It's changed a lot. But the older generation, things still.
Yeah.
Still
Well, apparently drinking a cup of tea can be an entire sort of ritual and
yeah. There is quite a lot. I told you about the seating arrangements
yeah.
and about you have to try and not to lose face. It's quite
So tell us about Guangxi.
Guangxi is the Chinese thing for entertaining people. A lot of business is done round the table. Either you get people quite merry. It's building up relations with this plenty of food and plenty of so-called Gambay with the
Okay.
Baijiu wine. That's known as Guangxi.
Okay.
And then you know you're getting on. It's very important to the Chinese culturally to build relations, not only as a business, but to foster good friendly relations as well.
Okay.
So, how did you transition from buying supplies from China into manufacturing, and when does this take us up to?
Well, that took us up to when our business, when I retired from business and our business closed in 2010. But back from that, how did we get started? Well, it's quite strange. Uh,
Hang on a minute. The business. Do you mean young Antony here didn't want to take up the reins of
well,
this mighty
well,
empire?
it was so exciting at that time, really. But there we go. So uh, we had a woman that used to work for one of the state-owned enterprises, and she used to source bits and pieces for us, like scissors, tweezers, and various different things that go into first aid kits
Okay.
and first aid boxes. She found the factory to produce certain boxes for us, and which was quite handy because her husband was a plastic industry, and they molded plastic boxes for us as well. And Jane, she was a very nice lady, and we used to get various items from her. And one item we were bringing in from her was a very small plastic, rectangular plastic box. And we used to buy various components from China and make it as a promotional product. We would put in various cotton buds, a little bandage, a little band-aid, plasters,
Yeah.
and we'd call it a tiny first aid kit. And we used to sell them as a promotional item, and it was quite popular. At that time, we were doing business with a company in England that specialised in alternative medicines. They used to
Yeah.
target the over 55s with I used to get even their magazines, all sorts of remedies,
Ginseng and stuff like this.
all
yeah.
that. You're
Yeah.
right. And they contacted us. It wasn't through the fact I was buying it. Just they picked a girl that selected, went through the catalogues and found several first aid manufacturers, and invited us to quote for a range of first aid items to put in their catalogue. So within 24 hours, I was sitting behind her at her office, and she was flabbergasted. She said that what a reaction. They said I've written to 26 or 27 companies.
Yeah.
I'm sure I see a few of them, but I made a pitch for their business.
Okay.
Eventually, it came to a short list of 3, and then, cut a long story, we were selected. We started supplying. We used to devote 2 or 3 pages of that catalogue to a couple of first aid kits and various other bandages and what have you. And one of the come on the first page of the catalogue was always a free gift item. If you buy over £20, you get this thing, something worth
Yeah.
£10. You know, a little photograph of it. So I suddenly struck on the idea of this tiny first aid kit. That could be interesting. So I sent them a sample. Would you consider that for you? Come down to see it immediately. So I went down with my sales manager down to Surbiton and Surrey, I think they were, and they said we want to do it because it ties so well together with the items inside the catalog.
Sure.
Build up the profile. We want to run this in February. We want uh, 10, for our comfort, 15,000 pieces to be delivered first, and then another 15,000, another 20,000, want 10,000 reserve, and this is the timeline. I said, because I know we had to bring in things from China.
Yeah.
Not only that, this plastic molded box, you can only produce so many. There's a finite number you can produce. So we'd have to produce at least another 1 or 2 plastic molds to be able to achieve that quantity in anywhere near that timeline. So we talked through certain different timelines. They said, if you can't deliver by such and such a date, you're not on. So I said, we'll do it. And my sales manager looked at me as if I was crazy. Within 2 days, I was sitting with Jane in Shanghai in China. I said, here's a business for you. Your husband has to start immediately molding these plastic boxes. You have to source all these materials, find a warehouse or a place you can do them. X, Y, Z. Here's the delivery deadline, and it's worth 60 or 1,000 first aid kits. And her eyes nearly popped out of her head. She says, she's on. I said, well, you set everything up. I'm coming back here in 2 or 3 weeks' time, and I want to see everything in production. So I come back here and I come back again, and she takes me into this huge warehouse, far bigger than we really needed. It was in reasonable condition, but not what I really like on an ongoing basis. And she had set up these tables, and she had employed people, and they were picking one item from here, putting there, one item from here, putting there. And
clearly, they'd never heard of Henry Ford.
Exactly. So I said, this is not
even Betty Ford.
not going to happen. Not only are these poor workers going to have the most painful backs you ever seen in your life, I'm organising it. So I made them get onto their suppliers, not deliver everything in random pack, but deliver them like soldiers so they could handle them much quicker. I made like a human conveyor belt with these things going along, and they were going along one. And when I left in a week's time, it was going like wonderfully. So much so that we fulfilled that contract, and then they said we want to run it again in another 6 or 8 months' time. After they ran it the second time, they said, well, that's it. So I told Jane, well, you have to let everybody go. And she was really obviously quite disappointed. I said, look here, Jane, don't let everybody go. Why don't we start a business together doing this permanently? And that's how it started. Because I'd done this prior to this, I'd done this in India before. I'm used to setting up clean rooms and all the manufacturing requirements, quality requirements. And before you know it, things happened quickly in China. Within 2 or 3 months, we had a small factory going in China. And eventually, after a few years, our husband, his plastic business was going extremely well. She wanted out of it, and we bought her equity out of the business, and it was a totally owned self-owned factory.
Right. How easy or difficult was that to do? Was there a lot of, I'm imagining even then, corruption would be a very serious offence in China, but I'm sure it still went on. Was there a lot?
I went through about 6 or 7 general managers in a period of 10 years or 12 or 12 years, and 2 or 3 of them had been for that particular reason, because it's endemic in them that there's a cutback on what they're buying. Right. I will tell you detailed stories about some instances. But it was difficult.
Yeah.
I think Tam was more meaning in terms of getting government permissions to do businesses, and without giving away any sordid details, was it incumbent upon you to deliver some envelopes or keep certain people happy in certain ways to get able to do business in China?
We never encountered. We're really small. In terms of big business, we're really small fish. Although I know it once or twice when the local tax office visited, I stayed out of it, but they went away with smiles on their faces. So I didn't want to know anything.
I hear. Okay, so before we hear more about the development of your business in China, I need to do a little segue. Those tiny first aid kits, they weren't your only innovation in your career. For example, those of us who are at least a little bit older than some people might remember that first aid kits very often you used to see them in little green plastic boxes with clips. Whereas nowadays, more often than not, you see them in aluminium casings, very aesthetically pleasing. And if I'm not mistaken, you were actually the first person to design one of these aluminium first aid kits, and then it was copied. Is that true?
Absolutely correct. I was always wanting to innovate when we could, and at that time these plastic rectangular boxes were very popular for in the cosmetics. When we put their lipsticks and compacts and what have you, and I thought that would make an idea for a track. And they also used to do them for camera cases. With your camera in one compartment, and your lenses in another compartment. And
for the spongy bit.
Exactly, and would be in an aluminium sort of case, and also briefcases. So anyway, my general manager at that particular time, a guy called Mr. White, I said to him, "Can you try and source a factory to produce these for us? I want a reliable factory." And the next time I was in China, we hopped on the train, went to a remote city in China, and a small I would say a small town. A small town in China is like 500,000 people.
Right. The size of Glasgow. Almost. Well, Glasgow's slightly bigger than that. But.
So, I mean, small town. I mean, in terms of population, but was it small or large in terms of area? What was?
I don't know. I was taken to this factory, introduced
blindfold,
to the factory, and we discussed. I saw what he's doing for CD, holding CDs. We're doing this for that.
Okay.
A whole plethora of products. Described what we wanted, 3 to 4 to one size with compartments, a couple of smaller ones. I said, "I'm not doing business with you unless we get total exclusivity."
Right.
Now, you have to take these things obviously on trust as best as you can.
Yeah.
But I said, if I see one copy, I'm out. So
much like Duncan Valentine.
Exactly. So I was firstly totally assured by the factory management, and what can you do other than it wasn't an item that you could patent because it's been done. It's only a variation of what's been done. You could probably maybe get design control very hard to control. So before this proved to be a very, very popular item. Now the largest annual trade fair in the world is known as the Canton Fair, not the Guangzhou Fair. It's so large that they've split it now into 3 different sections. It's open for maybe 10 days and it's closed for a few days and open. Now I went with Mr. White to look for new products at the fair, at the section where they had the medical supplies. So I was looking around and he went to look somewhere else. And lo and behold, what do I see in 2 different booths? Aluminium first aid boxes. So I get hold of him and I said, these guys have sold us down the river.
Right.
So we said, let's go over to these places and act as potential customers.
Yeah.
Want to see them. We went over to these places and we examined the boxes. They clearly not come from the same factory.
Sure.
The quality was nowhere near up to ours. The clips were horrible, but they looked the same.
Right.
Green at the front with the word first aid on it.
Okay.
So they even copied the design.
Yeah, but it was a poorer version of it. But the cat was out the bag. We went back to the factory. He implored upon us that he'd never done it. But it's simple in China. Somebody in middle management knows a factory nearby or not so nearby that do similar things. Will take the sample and say, "Hey, I have an idea for you."
Okay.
And that is corrupt.
Right.
But it happens.
I mean, I guess someone could see it and like it and copy it. But so if I'm giving you free rein to blow your trumpet, if you want to expose any other innovations that you had.
It's hard to say that there were quite a lot of them on the way. Some smaller, some larger.
But by the way, I mean, how did that affect? I mean, the aluminium cases. I mean, how did that affect costs in terms of?
They were a premium item with us.
Okay.
They're obviously more costly.
But am I right in saying they're quite common now?
Oh yes,
They're very much you
very
see them everywhere.
common now.
But they do look very beautiful compared to these old green boxes of clips.
Yeah.
But it's hard to say about other items. Some of them, sometimes it's more development in the way of the way we package things and present things that make them look more attractive. Um, we worked on. I was working latterly before I retired on a very innovative first aid box, which unfortunately I've still got the drawings. It never quite came to
Okay.
fruition. Uh, I'm not going to give away any secrets in case I want to take it out of the wood pile. But basically,
The Howard Rourke.
but without giving too
of
much away, if you know a
surgical
first aid box, everything is scrambled inside. When you want to get an item urgently, you have to
Yeah.
get it. This would be in the fascia, visual fascia, and you would press a button, and a drawer would slide out with the item that you'd want.
So watch this
Space Age
space.
stuff.
Now
Buck
we've got
Rogers first
a
aid
little
kit.
under 10 minutes left, so I just want to make sure that you get the stories that you're most enthusiastic about discussing about doing business in China that you'd like to, and as we come into the last segment of our show.
Yes, well, basically, I have to say that notwithstanding all the cultural differences and the fact that a lot of people everybody knows about China as a sourcing item, it still remains today a good place to do business with. I'm still got, as you quite rightly say, I have ongoing consultancy work for various companies that I used to be either suppliers of us or people that I was introduced to you. So much so that every year in the very largest exhibition in medical supplies that takes place in the world in Dusseldorf in Germany every November, I arrange with the exhibition organizers to buy floor space, which is very hard to get, and I invite Chinese and Indian companies, it's open to any company by the way, to take up floor space, and I arrange the whole design of an integrated stand, trying to make sure that the companies are not really in direct competition with each other.
More in coalition.
Exactly, even though there's maybe slight overlap between them, so that they can integrate between the customer base. And that the last 2 or 3 years I've handled 36 square meters of space. This year in November I'm handling 80 square meters.
Wow, that's a huge.
It's just a huge jump. And this last year I was wanting to retire from it, but my co-exhibitors, they more or less implored upon me to keep going.
It's good to be in demand.
So what? I mean, this whole time where you were dealing with mainland China, did you have any dealings with Hong Kong at all? At any
Oh
point?
yes, we were dealing with Hong Kong prior to going into China.
So that would have been help in a sense.
That was a good help. Although the culture of Hong Kong, we say to most people in Hong Kong, certainly the younger people, the older people, are you Chinese? They will get a bit upset about, no, I'm a Hong Kong person.
Right.
Hong Kong first and Chinese second.
Sure.
And maybe the younger people, this will change eventually.
Yeah. What would you have said the main difference was between dealing with Hong Kong and dealing with mainland China?
Well, first of all, they all spoke English.
Right.
They had the infrastructure. They had the banking system, the exchange system, the hotels and everything was up to right from the very beginning up to fully international standards.
Okay.
It was it was a complete China. When I first went to China, at that particular time in the early 80s, Hong Kong was a complete international city, while China was backward.
Yeah. And yet, the amazing thing I think about Hong Kong was it took a very short space of time to transform Hong Kong into this kind of powerhouse of commerce and industry.
Well, Hong Kong's remarkable in the way that when I first was doing business in Hong Kong, it was a manufacturing base.
Right.
Huge amount. I used to buy that time plastic baby pants. Had people that used to do baby products, and they're making Hong Kong for me and factory. But as soon as China opened its doors, Hong Kong shifted all the business into the cheaper manufacturing of China, and within a period of a few years, Hong Kong became a service a service country. People think everybody will lose their jobs. All these Hong Kong exists as a very wealthy
Service economy.
hardly
Zero.
makes anything.
The British economist David Ricardo, I can't even got his name right, Ricardo, he talked about comparative advantage and absolute advantage, where even if a country such as Hong Kong might be able to do everything better than China, manufacturing and services, they're still better going for the services which they have the most difference and their benefit, and both sides can still benefit, and that's what I thought of because I'm an economics geek.
But could an economy survive long term in just service industry?
Well, why couldn't it if it's as long as it's connected to the rest of the world?
Right.
Singapore's another example.
Yes.
I mean, Singapore does have a bit of manufacturing, some, but it's predominantly banking service. Very, very, very prosperous. I mean, the standard of living in Singapore is, and also Hong Kong is.
I've got one more question because you were asking about the difference between doing business in Hong Kong or China. You mentioned a few times also doing business in India and getting manufacturing from there. Now, while it was not communist country in that period, it was still under the influence of socialism after the British left. So what was the difference between trying to do business in India as compared to China?
Well, the difference, first of all, on the positive side, they all spoke really good English.
Yeah.
Again, they had the long tradition of Britain and knowing Western culture.
Yeah.
A lot of India wasn't
service.
quite as social as you mentioned.
Yeah.
It depends on state to state. I was doing business mostly in the state of Bengal in Calcutta, and that was dominated by the communist dominated. It was very, but it didn't really affect me. I was doing business with family businesses. The only difference, I think, where it got difficult in India was was the fact that they weren't prepared to invest. My colleagues there, they were working with very, very old machinery. No matter I told them that, can you innovate here or there, I was running into a brick wall.
Right.
Whereas I found out that China, certainly when the motor started running, they saw investment as a way of developing their business. A different mentality from that point of view.
Kind of long-term, far-seeing sort of mentality.
Now maybe it's probably changed a lot in India now as well, for sure.
Yes, especially over the last 25 years.
Yes.
In the late 80s, many people said that India was never going to develop and would never become a developed country, but they have seen incredible progress. So that's a wonderful...
By embracing the evils of capitalism.
So, thank you. A very lovely history of the different ways that business was done and how China changed over time. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I'd just like to thank you guys for having me along. And,
no, it's been a pleasure.
I hope I not only haven't bored you, but haven't bored your wonderful audience.
Yeah.
Well, we'll let you know. We'll see how the viewing figures go.
Certainly, I certainly wasn't bored. I may be somewhat biased, but we'll soon find out in the YouTube comments whether how it landed. So
available subject to price as for consultants.
Yeah, after dinner speaking. Yeah, absolutely.
No, I've got enough. I now want to enjoy more of my retirement.
Enough on his plate in terms of after dinner speaking.
Especially after those snakes and things. Was there another story you wanted to tell about?
Yeah, tell us about this.
Yes, a quick story about a dish. We're taking to one of these banquets again with all
by dish. You take it. We're talking about food and not a female.
And around this table in Shanghai, various dishes, and suddenly they brought up a plate in the middle, and things were moving there, and I had to look closer. And I said, "What is this?" They said, "It's drunken prawns," which means drunken prawns. And they put these live shrimps in liquor, and they get out. They enjoy. What a way to go! But when they're still alive, they start picking them up with their chopsticks and eating them.
Okay.
And they're looking at me, And he said it's a very specialty dish. And I'm stuck. You can lose face very easily. And I said, I have a video camera. Oh, video camera. So I took out my camera. I'm filming them all doing this horrible thing. But they forgot about the fact I wasn't eating it. And when I showed it back home, my wife thought it was what's that cockroach on the table? And my sister-in-law was put off her food for over a week.
Wow. So you got a more lucky escape than those drunken prawns did.
Well, for those women who are on a diet, please watch the Drunken Prawns video. It'll put you off your food for a week. You'll lose pounds in no time.
Thank you again once more, Dad, for coming in the show. And to you at home, be sure to share and tune in next week. Thank you very much.